They laughed. Loud, full-belly laughs that echoed through the candlelit hall like applause at a comedy club. She paused on stage, soaking it in, her fingers gripping the microphone a little tighter, her lips curling in that familiar smirk, the one she used when she knew she'd just crossed a line and gotten away with it. I didn't laugh. I didn't blink. I just watched. Come on, she chuckled into the mic. Like you've never lied to your partner to do something actually fun? Laughter again. Even louder this time. She looked stunning under the lights. Confident. Effortless. Alive. Everyone saw a rising star. I saw something else. The joke was about a fake girl's trip to the lake house. She said she'd gone to recharge with her friends, but in her own words, let's just say the only thing I was soaking in was trouble, and not the bathtub kind. People lost it. Some guy at table 3 actually slapped the table, tears in his eyes. And just behind her, about 15 feet back, I stood, hidden in the shadows near the catering door. She didn't know I was there. She thought I'd left town that morning. Business trip. Delayed flight. She kissed me goodbye at 7:12 a.m. Sharp, her breath still minty from mouthwash. And now I was watching her publicly humiliate me for sport. Or maybe she didn't think I'd care. Maybe she didn't think I'd ever find out what she meant by soaking in trouble. Or maybe she just wanted to see if anyone in the crowd would flinch. I looked at the round tables packed with polished people in suits and gowns, all pretending they didn't hear what she actually said. No one made eye contact with me, even though I was right there, standing, breathing, listening. The seat at our reserved table was still empty. My seat. It had been empty all night. And that's when she glanced that way, for just a split second, and her laugh cut short. Eyes widened, barely. She didn't miss a beat. She finished her story. The crowd clapped again, but her smile was tighter now, and her hand trembled when she passed the mic back to the host. She didn't expect me to hear it. She didn't expect me to come back early. And she definitely didn't expect me to notice the way Derek left the room 5 minutes before she started talking. But I did. I noticed everything. And for once, I wasn't going to sit quietly. I didn't follow her to the after-party. I didn't make a scene, didn't confront her in front of the donors and board members and the 3 city councilmen who just finished praising her for her bold authenticity. I just left. But I didn't go home. Instead, I drove 2 blocks away and sat in my car, in the dark, outside a closed laundromat. My hands were still clenched around the wheel, even though the engine was off. I kept seeing her face, how fast her smile vanished when her eyes landed on that empty chair. How she tried to recover, but her voice cracked on the next joke. It wasn't the joke itself that broke me. It was how easily it came out of her mouth. Like she'd practiced it. Like it wasn't even the first time she'd said it out loud. She'd made me the punchline, and they cheered for it. I thought about going home, but I knew she'd beat me there. She was always fast to escape after a public event, slipping away to wind down or grab one drink with her inner circle. I wasn't ready to see her yet. Or maybe I didn't want her to see me. Not like this. So I waited. At 12:41 a.m., she texted me. Hey babe, saw your seat was empty. Everything okay? No period. No heart emoji. She always used one before. I didn't reply. At 1:09 a.m., she called. I let it ring. Then again at 1:14. By 1:33, she stopped trying. That's when I drove back to the house. The porch light was on. She always left it on for me, even when she was mad. But tonight it felt performative. Like she was putting on a show for a neighbor who might be watching, someone who didn't know what she'd just said into that microphone. I unlocked the door slowly. Her heels were by the rug. The gold ones. The ones she said made her feel dangerous. They still smelled like spilled champagne. I walked past them and headed for the office. She never goes in there. Says the books make her sleepy. But I go in there to think, to disappear from the chaos. And that night, I didn't turn on the light. I just sat in the shadows and waited. At 2:07 a.m., I heard the soft pad of her bare feet on the hardwood. The pause in front of the office door. The quiet knock. Milton. I didn't answer. She hesitated. Then the knob turned halfway before she stopped herself. I didn't mean it like that, she said, voice low. You weren't supposed to hear it. I still said nothing. She sighed. I was just trying to be funny. It's not what it sounded like. That's when I opened the drawer. Not to grab anything dangerous. Not to make some grand dramatic gesture. Just to feel something solid. Cold. Heavy. I pulled out the printed itinerary from her lake house weekend. It was folded 3 times. Neatly. Like a clean lie. Then I pulled out the USB drive I found in the laundry 2 weeks ago. She hadn't even noticed it was missing. And finally, I pulled out the tiny velvet pouch I'd hidden behind the books, where I'd been keeping a new ring. A replacement. Not because I wanted to replace her, but because I thought maybe we needed a new chapter. A reset. A promise made again. Now it just felt like a punchline I'd barely avoided delivering. I stood, opened the office door, and walked past her without speaking. She didn't follow me. Not that night. But someone else did. The next morning wasn't quiet. It should have been. Sunday mornings usually were sacred in our house. Pancakes. Pajamas. NPR humming in the background. But this time, I woke to the sound of dishes clinking in the sink and the vacuum roaring at full volume in the next room. A performance of normalcy. A cover-up of noise. Eloise was already dressed. Full face of makeup. Hair done. Like she'd never gone to sleep. She didn't look at me when I came downstairs. "Coffee's fresh," she said without turning around. "Didn't know if you were still mad." I didn't respond. I just sat at the table and watched her clean the spotless counter. She finally turned. "You're really going to punish me with this silent treatment?" she asked, arms crossed, but voice sugar-sweet. "Because of one joke? Seriously, Milton?" I blinked slowly. "You think that was about the joke? Oh, come on. It was exaggerated. It's not like I actually did anything. People like edgy humor, and you've always said I'm a good storyteller. Derek left before you told it." Her mouth opened slightly, closed again. I leaned forward. "That joke? You aimed it at me. But you missed. You hit yourself. And I saw it land." She scoffed, turned away, muttering something about drama. But I wasn't finished. I slid the USB drive across the table. "He dropped this in your car, didn't he?" She stared at it like it was a snake. "You didn't even bother to hide it," I added. "Laundry basket. Week of the lake house trip. I almost washed it with the towels." She didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there, frozen like a bad actress waiting for her next line. When I finally left the house, I didn't have a destination in mind. I just drove. My hands were steady for the first time in days, and my head buzzed with questions I wasn't ready to answer. But somewhere along the way, I ended up in the parking lot behind the Civic Center. Same place the banquet was held. Same place I saw her step on stage and pretend I didn't exist. I parked in the back row, staring at the building's loading dock. And that's when I saw him, leaning against the wall, wearing the same leather jacket he wore to last year's winter gala. Tall, thin, hair messy in the way guys think looks effortless. Derek. He was smoking, looking at his phone, relaxed, until he looked up and saw me. For a second, I expected him to nod, say something, maybe even smirk. But he didn't. He straightened, dropped the cigarette, crushed it. Then he walked toward my car. I stayed seated. He stopped 4 feet from my window and waited, like he wanted me to say something first. So I rolled the window down and asked, "Did you laugh at her joke last night?" He blinked, confused. "What?" "At the banquet," I said. "Did you laugh?" A pause. Then he said, "It wasn't funny." "Good," I said, starting the engine. "Milton," he began. But I didn't wait for the rest. I just pulled away. I didn't need his guilt. I didn't want his apology. What I wanted was to watch Eloise try to lie to me again, knowing I'd already spoken to the one man she never thought I'd meet face to face. And when I got home, she was waiting on the porch, her arms folded tight across her chest, like she was the one who'd been betrayed. She opened her mouth to speak. But this time I was ready. And I wasn't listening. She didn't ask where I'd been. Not directly. Instead, Eloise stood at the edge of the porch like she'd been rehearsing something. Her eyes were puffy, though I wasn't sure if it was from crying or just exhaustion, and her arms were locked tight around her ribs like she was holding herself together with sheer will. "Can we talk?" she asked quietly, like she was scared to speak too loud and shatter whatever fragile thread still connected us. I walked past her into the house without a word. Behind me, the door clicked shut. The floor creaked under her feet. And then silence. She followed me into the kitchen. I poured a glass of water, drank half of it, and only then did I turn to face her. "You told that room full of people that you lied to me," I said, voice even. "You told it like it was a joke, like it didn't matter. So why does it matter now?" She sat at the edge of the bar stool like she couldn't quite commit to being comfortable. "Because you're twisting it," she said. "It wasn't about you. It was just a bit. A story." I nodded slowly. "You said you lied to your husband. That's me, right?" Her jaw tightened. Milton. I talked to Derek. Now her breath caught. Just a flicker, but enough. She didn't speak. He said it wasn't funny. She looked away, toward the window. Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. He wasn't supposed to be there. But he was. And then he left before your story started. Why? She didn't answer. So I kept going. I bet you thought I'd never see it. That you could get away with being the edgy one. The wild card. Because you know I don't make noise. I don't raise my voice. I'm predictable. She looked back at me then. And there it was, not guilt. Not fear. Annoyance. God. Milton, she snapped. You're acting like I cheated on you on live TV. I stared at her for a long, breathless moment. Then I stepped to the cabinet, opened the drawer, and pulled out a manila envelope. I placed it on the counter between us. She didn't touch it. What's this supposed to be? She asked. Proof that you didn't need to say it out loud, I said. You already left me months ago. Inside the envelope were copies of her hotel receipts. 3 different weekends over the past 5 months. All charged to her personal card. All during volunteer retreats or planning weekends. She grabbed it, flipped through it. You went through my email? No, I said. You saved the confirmations in a shared folder. You just never thought I'd look. She fell quiet. I could see the panic rising, just beneath her skin, like a storm behind her eyes. She was trying to blink away. But it wasn't shame. It was strategy. She was calculating. You don't know the whole story, she said at last. Then tell me. I replied, staring hard. She stepped closer. Her voice softened. Slower now. Intentional. It wasn't like that. I didn't go there to betray you. I just felt trapped. Like I was losing who I was. And Derek, he listened. He made me feel seen. That's it. That's all it was. She paused, watching me for reaction. But I gave her none. So, no affair? I asked. I didn't say that, she whispered. My stomach turned. That moment right there, that exact moment, was when the last piece of me that still believed in her died. Because if it had been just a lie, just one mistake, she would have said no. But she didn't. She wanted me to feel it. Wanted me to understand that I had failed in some way that made her betrayal inevitable. And the most twisted part? She said it like she still expected me to forgive her. As if the performance was more important than the truth. I didn't speak to her for the next 2 days. Not out of spite, but because I knew anything I said would sound smaller than what I'd just lived through. When someone rewrites the entire narrative of your marriage in a single breath, I didn't say that. There's not much left to negotiate. Eloise tried to keep things normal. She made coffee, watered her plants, answered phone calls in the living room with that practiced smile in her voice, pretending she still lived in a world where everything was fine. But I noticed the little things. She didn't sing while cooking. She avoided opening her laptop around me. She triple-checked the door locks before bed, as if expecting something, or someone, to come for her. Tuesday night, I heard her crying in the shower. Not loud sobs, just a slow, strangled sort of breathing. Like she was trying to mourn something she wasn't ready to name. I almost knocked. Almost asked if she was okay. But then I remembered the joke. And I remembered the way Derek dropped his cigarette like it burned. So instead, I walked into her home office. She hadn't touched it since Saturday. Probably didn't think I'd go in there. Probably assumed I'd be too heartbroken or too respectful to cross that invisible boundary. But she forgot who she married. I'm not loud. I'm not violent. But I pay attention. She left her work tablet charging on the desk. I stared at it for a long time before I opened it. My hands weren't shaking. My heart wasn't pounding. I felt still. Cold. Like I'd already accepted whatever I was about to see. It didn't take long. She had an archived messages folder inside one of her social media apps, buried under an account I didn't even know she had. A secondary profile, supposedly for volunteer coordination. There were no messages from volunteers. But there were plenty from Derek. Some were mundane. Some flirtatious. Some crossed so many lines they didn't even resemble conversations anymore. They were timestamps of decay, pings of betrayal, and then there were the voice notes. I clicked the first one, and her voice spilled into the room, breathless and soft. Just parked. You better not be wearing that awful hoodie again. If I'm sneaking out like a teenager, you're at least shaving. Second one. You didn't say goodbye last time. That was cruel. You know how I get. You can't just leave me in that motel room like I'm nothing. Third one. I told Milton we're expanding the food bank hours. So if he asks, you know the drill. I stopped it there. That one hit different. Not because of the lie itself, but because of how casually she said it. Like I wasn't a person, just an obstacle to reroute. I should have felt rage, but I didn't. What I felt was embarrassment. Deep, marrow-level shame. That while I was cooking for her, covering late bills, and planning a surprise weekend trip for our anniversary, she was memorizing which lies worked best. And even now, in the silence of that office, I could still hear the audience clapping. I could still see her smiling behind the mic. I could still feel the way the room had tilted when I realized everyone else knew something I didn't. I backed out of the app, took screenshots, sent them to myself. Not for revenge, not for leverage, but because I knew she'd erase everything the moment she suspected I knew. And I wanted to keep something. Proof. Not for a courtroom, not even for friends. Just for me. To remind myself I hadn't imagined it. That I hadn't overreacted. That the woman I thought I loved, really loved, wasn't just gone. She was performing the role of herself for so long. Even she couldn't tell when the script stopped being fiction. Thursday evening, she made my favorite dinner. Not one of my favorites. The favorite. The one she only made when something big was happening. Promotion, anniversary. The night I got accepted to my grad program back in the day. Creamy herb risotto. The kind she usually complains takes too long. Roasted mushrooms with garlic confit. Even the wine I liked that she always said was too earthy. The table was set for two. Candles. Cloth napkins. Silverware that only came out when we had guests. Except there were no guests. Just the two of us. She didn't call me. Didn't text. Just laid it out like nothing had happened. Like we weren't living in a half-collapsed timeline where the truth was still echoing through the house, and I hadn't heard her voice whispering to someone else, telling him how to lie to me. When I walked in and saw the spread, she looked up from her seat and smiled. Not a wide smile. A careful one. One she'd practiced in the mirror. I figured we could eat, she said. You haven't been eating. I didn't sit. I looked at the table. Then at her. Then at the seat she'd pulled out for me. Angled just right. Like it was waiting for someone who hadn't existed for months. Did you cook this for Derek too? I asked evenly. Her smile didn't falter. Not immediately. She tilted her head, like I'd just said something in another language. Excuse me. The risotto, I said. Or is that just reserved for men who know how to leave a motel room properly? That did it. Her mouth opened, stunned. She stood slowly, eyes locked on mine, hands clenched by her sides. You had no right. You had no boundaries, I shot back. We stared at each other across the table, food steaming between us like the last barrier before impact. Then she laughed. It wasn't a real laugh. It was sharp, dry, tired. You know what's funny? She said. You're angrier at me for how I lied than why I lied. Because you didn't lie to escape me, I said. You lied because you enjoyed it. You liked watching me trust you. You liked seeing how far it could go before I caught up. She didn't deny it. And that told me everything I still needed to know. She walked to the counter, picked up her wine glass, sipped it like we were just having a normal evening. Like this was the kind of thing we did now. Air grievances between bites of nostalgia. I didn't mean for it to happen, she said finally, not looking at me. But I didn't stop it either. And that should tell you something. Oh, it tells me a lot, I said. Especially that you were never as careful as you thought. Her eyes flicked to mine. You left your voicemail backup synced to the cloud, I said flatly. Now she looked pale. I have all of it, I added. Everything you thought you deleted. Every laugh, every secret motel key, every time you said my name like it was a burden. She lowered her glass slowly. What are you going to do with it? She asked. Her voice cracked on the last word, like she already knew the answer but hoped I wouldn't say it. I haven't decided, I said. But I'll tell you what I'm not going to do. I'm not going to sit here, eat this meal, pretend this is salvageable, and let you act like this was just a bad chapter in a good book. She opened her mouth. I held up a hand. I'm done being the husband who waits quietly for you to circle back to him when you're bored of playing pretend. I pushed the chair back in without sitting and walked out. And this time, it was my seat at the table that stayed empty. The day after the dinner, she started knocking before entering rooms. I noticed it right away. She used to wander freely through the house, humming, calling out my name like she owned every inch of air between the walls. But now she hovered, waited, tapped gently, like the house had turned on her too. I spent most of that Friday in the guest room, technically my office, but now the only place that felt untouched. Clean, quiet. I locked the door, not because I needed to, but because I wanted her to hear it click. Mid-afternoon, She slipped a note under the door. Not a text. Not a confrontation. Just folded paper, like we were pen pals in middle school. Please let me fix this. I'm not the person you think I am. Not really. I didn't respond. Because the irony was cruel. She was exactly the person I thought she was, for years. The problem was, I kept thinking she was someone else. And now, she wanted to patch it all with a handwritten note. That night, I heard her crying again. But she didn't try to hide it this time. It came from the hallway, loud, raw, awful, like a sound from someone being pulled open. She was sitting outside the door, knees to her chest, sobbing into her own arms like a child. "Milton, please," she gasped. "Please, I'm sorry. I didn't know what I was doing. I felt forgotten. You were so far away, even when you were here." And for a second, just a second, I almost believed her, because it sounded real. But then I remembered the voice note, the one where she giggled and said, "If he ever finds out, I'll just cry. He folds when I cry." She knew how to make it sound real. And suddenly, the crying didn't feel like grief. It felt like choreography. I didn't open the door. She stayed there for nearly an hour. Eventually, the sobs stopped. I waited until the hallway was quiet again. Then I opened my laptop and began compiling everything. Every voice note, every message, every hotel receipt, every cloud log she forgot to wipe. Not to ruin her, not to punish her, but because I needed to see it all in one place. Like building a crime board. Connecting dots not to catch her, but to catch myself in every ignored red flag. Every time I let charm stand in for honesty. Every joke I laughed at to keep the peace. Around midnight, I walked into our bedroom for the first time in 3 days. She was asleep, curled up on my side of the bed. Instinctively, my stomach turned. Not because of the betrayal, but because of how natural she looked there, like nothing had changed. But everything had. I stood at the foot of the bed for a long while, just watching her breathe, listening to the soft exhale, the way her lashes twitched, the way her fingers were clenched around a pillow she used to throw on the floor every night. She shifted slightly and whispered something in her sleep. A name. Not mine. Quiet. But not quiet enough. That was the moment the decision became final. No more waiting. No more hoping. No more, maybe she didn't mean it like that. And yet, I didn't wake her. Didn't slam a door. Didn't throw anything. I just walked into the closet, grabbed the bag I'd already packed 2 days ago, and left it by the front door. Because when morning came, it wouldn't be her who got to leave first. It would be me. And this time, I'd be the one who didn't say goodbye. I left at 6:07 a.m. No dramatic pause at the door. No final glance down the hallway. Just a quiet exit, the way you leave a hotel after checkout. Keys on the counter, lights off, the room no longer yours. The street was pale and quiet. That early morning hush before the world begins spinning again. I drove to the edge of town and turned east, toward the hills. No destination. Just distance. Just forward. Somewhere past the county line, my phone buzzed. Her name on the screen. I didn't answer. Not out of spite, but because there was nothing left to say that wouldn't just loop us back into the wreckage. And I'd already crawled out. Instead, I pulled into the overlook where we used to watch thunderstorms. Sat on the hood of the car. Let the silence fill my lungs. Watched the sun try to burn through the mist. I hadn't felt that calm in months. Maybe years. A few hours later, I got the email. Subject line. You were right. I just didn't want you to be. No apology in the body. No defense. Just this. You were always the safest place in the world, Milton. And I treated you like background noise. I thought you'd always be there, clapping from the corner, smiling like a fool while I stood on stage pretending I earned the applause. You didn't deserve that. I hope someday you let someone see you. All of you. Even the parts one ignored. I didn't reply, because for the first time in years, I didn't need her to understand me. I understood myself. I spent the next few weeks rebuilding things slowly. Moved into a little rental on the edge of town. Got a dog. Started cooking again. Started reading out loud to nobody. Just because I missed the sound of my own voice saying something that wasn't an apology. People reached out. Friends, old coworkers, even my sister who used to say I disappeared into Eloise's shadow. They didn't ask for the whole story. Just said they were glad I was back. And I realized something strange. The world didn't fall apart when I stopped protecting her version of it. It actually got quieter. Lighter. One evening, a month later, I went to a small poetry reading at the library. I didn't expect anything. Just wanted to hear words that weren't mine for a change. I sat in the back. Midway through the night, a woman sat next to me. Didn't speak. Just nodded politely and unwrapped a piece of gum like she'd done this 100 times. During the final poem, she whispered something about the stanza being clunky. I smiled. You edit in your head too? She grinned. Only the ones worth saving. We didn't exchange numbers. Didn't pretend it meant anything. But as I left, she looked at the empty chair I'd been sitting in and said quietly, shame. I liked having someone next to me who actually listened. And in that moment, it hit me. All that time I spent trying to be seen by someone who only looked when the crowd was watching. I was finally visible. Not to the world. Not to an audience. But to myself. And that was the first real applause I ever needed.